We go ahead. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Learn Like a CPA show. Today, I have a great guest. His name's Jeremy. I saw Jeremy actually a few times before we met in person at the STR Wealth Conference back in, when was it, March of 2023 we met, Jeremy, right?
Feels
And
like ages ago.
does it really? Yeah, it does.
I feel like I've known you forever, Ryan.
I seen you before. I've seen your TikToks or your Instagram show up. I don't know if I was following you or not, but
You better
I
have been.
saw you. I saw you walking with Michael Chang. And there's a concept that I talk about and that I teach in a lot of my stuff is that it's that transfer of authority and it's that recommendation and that vouch. So once I saw you walking with Michael, who we're gonna have on the podcast as well pretty soon, I was like, this guy is legit because I saw you with Michael. I know Michael's legit. I love what he stands for. I've talked to Michael a ton. It was actually my first time meeting him, but I saw him with you, and I said, okay, let's make this happen. I don't know if I introduced myself or what not, but I mean, we instantly hit it off. We became pretty good friends, I would say.
We did. And I think, yeah, that's funny that you see me on social, but seeing me on social doesn't make me legit by itself. Having, someone who is actually preaching what they sow and doing what they show that they're doing online. Nowadays it's kind of a rarity. So, seeing someone, Michael, who obviously is legit, and me and him being buddies, show that, I'm not, I'm doing things. I'm not just saying things.
Yeah, and I don't know if it is like I didn't think you were legit, but it just that stamp or that seal of approval that I saw that you were with Michael, and that's something important too that I talk a lot about is what's called your sphere of influence. So, you out of anybody actually in that 1,100 person conference probably had the most followers on social media total. I can't think of somebody who has more followers than you do, but it's all about your sphere of influence. And the way that I talk about this a lot is the number one important person at a nightclub is the DJ, right? But on the street, he's just another guy or gal with tattoos and hair. Same thing at a bar. The bartender is the most important person at the bar, right? So it's your sphere of influence, and because at that conference, people know me, people know my brand, people listen to my podcast, etc. Out on the street, I'm just nobody. So understanding like your sphere of influence and who you have that impact on, it goes really important. I could see that being a big thing for you in the next few years here.
Yeah, I think it's funny you say that because like I talk. So my girlfriend does social media and she's a larger social media personality. She's more mainstream for sure than I am, and her content is like running content, and a lot of it's in New York City. She does running interviews, and if like we walk on the West Side Highway or around New York, like she gets like people either give her a double look and kind of like squint their eyes like, wait, is that her? Or people come up and say hi and say, oh my gosh, I love your stuff. Like, it's, if you go on a walk with her, like someone will probably come up and say something. Whereas like when I go to like a real estate conference or something, or like a real estate meetup, I've been to like a couple random real estate meetups. People are like talking to me. They're like, wait a minute, do I know who you are? Like, I know you from somewhere. Like, where do I know you from? So it's kind of funny how it's like in our niche. Yeah. Like you're known in your niche, but guess we're not mainstream, Ryan. We're not mainstream people. We're niche.
So they recognize Kate. Her name is right, Kate.
Yeah.
They recognize Kate more than you.
I mean, in New York City, I mean her.
Yeah.
She's probably gotten like 100 million views in the last 30 days, and 50 million of them are probably from New Yorkers.
Good point. So when I first met you, I peeped your Instagram the night we met, and then one of the things I saw was that you used to play basketball for North Carolina, and I'm a pretty big basketball fan myself. I played basketball, and that's a big deal, right? So tell me a little bit about like how you went that journey, because if I'm not mistaken, that's a Division I basketball school, right? And you were there and you studied economics, right? But how did you kind of wind up in this short-term rental space?
Yeah, so growing up I moved to North Carolina when I was 9, and basketball is everything. B-ball is life in North Carolina, like truly is. We got UNC, Duke, NC State, all these basketball programs with a story, like a super long history. And I grew up a huge Tar Heel basketball fan. And when I went to UNC, I was on the junior varsity basketball team. So UNC is like weird where they still have a junior varsity basketball program. Not a lot of colleges do. And essentially the point of the program is to train the walk-ons. So you don't directly walk on a varsity. Like you have 2 years of effectively a tryout before walking on. And it's also to train the coaches. So today's head coach, Hubert Davis, was my coach on junior varsity. So it was a cool experience in the sense of we played in the Dean Dome. We had all the we had trainers that were the same varsity trainers. We had rehab facilities. We really it felt like we were part of a professional program, which was awesome. That definitely gave me, discipline, but also kind of just seeing the inside of a smooth operation. Like, I mean, it was, probably $100 million a year business effectively, like essentially, not that far off like a professional program in sense of, how big budgets were for different things. So that was really cool. And I did not make the varsity team. There's 12, 13 guys on JV fighting for a couple spots that, depending on the year, there may or may not be a spot for you. So a lot of it's luck. But yeah, when basketball didn't work out for me, I, quickly was like, all right, I got to get an internship. Like, I got to get a job. And that summer, this was sophomore year, that summer, I applied for a bunch of internships and I had pretty solid grades. Like, I mean, not a 4.0, but solid grades, like, 3.7 or something pretty solid. At that time, I think I was studying economics and computer science. So good fundamentals and get anything. I didn't even like the company my dad worked for my entire life. I applied for an internship there, got rejected from that one. Literally like got rejected from every internship. So I guess I was like, all right, well, I can't do nothing. So I gotta do something. I gotta make money. Like I need to make money. Like that was really the core of it is like, I don't have money. I gotta make money. So I started doing kind of like freelance, web development, just anything I could do, kind of like little hustle or side hustles. Started essentially like a digital marketing, like digital products agency with a college friend. Actually went very well. Like in the next year, we scaled it to be a legitimate business. One where, I was thinking about not coming back to college my senior year and just doing that full time because things were going really well. And ultimately parted ways with, so that business is actually still, it has like 90 or 100 employees nowadays, probably like revenue of 10 million, but I left.
Wow.
Yeah, but I left early. And to be frank, and this is something I've learned about myself is that, it was me and 3 guys who are all like old friends. So ultimately when like a big decision came, it was them versus me was kind of what it came to be. And like, that was, every time like a serious decision, serious conversation happened, I felt like I was outranked, outnumbered. And, kind of we came to a mutual decision to part ways. And I did that and kind of went back to being a freelance web developer, had clients. One of my clients was a New York based private equity startup that was really cool. It was actually only the founders when I started working with them, and they brought me in as their first employee. And that was, cool experience. But then COVID hit in March of 2020 and, really the roof, the roof fell on us literally. And we were, didn't have that much money left in the bank. For a moment there, we didn't think we'd be able to fundraise. And my salary was drastically reduced to, about $2,500 a month. But for those of you guys who know how expensive a New York City apartment is, it's really not enough to cover that or anything. So at that point, I was like, all right, this is, several times now I have kind of worked with others, or for better or worse, for others. And like, yes, I do have some like startup experience, and I've definitely am living, my jobs have not been like the quote unquote traditional jobs, but ultimately I've worked for someone else. Ultimately it's been someone else's decision, and other people have had control over what I do on a daily basis and how much I make. And I'm done. Like, I'm done with that. I can't live my whole life like that. So I needed an alternative. And that's where I found short-term rentals. Was, really 2020, boat rentals, Airbnbs. And a couple of years later, like once I figured out, short-term rentals are very, very lucrative. And, you can have a really lean operation where, it's your thing, but, you've got a team of virtual assistants or other coworkers. But really it was my baby. My short-term rental business was mine, and, it worked. And here we are 3 years later and have scaled from, probably, just hitting like 6-figure revenue in 2020 to like well over 7-figure revenue in the last like year span and coming into 2023.
So we said something in there. So did you finish college or no?
I
think missed
did. I
that.
did. I finished. I actually only had one class after my junior year.
Okay.
So I went back. I skipped a semester, then went back my final semester to take one class.
So it sounds a lot like your entrepreneur endeavors while in college or a little bit before that gave you the confidence to go out on your own and kind of do the short-term rental thing, because a lot of times, at least what I see, people are, and it may be the way the system or society is set up, but they put you into debt just so you can get a job that then you can pay back the debt that you took out, only then to have your lifestyle get increased. So then you start buying houses and cars and all these assets, some assets that go down in value, and you never actually get out of it, right? There's people that are going to be working for somebody else for the rest of their life. At what point do you remember something that clicked that said, I'll never have to work for somebody else ever again?
Yeah. So even though, I didn't do that kind of traditional W-2 route where I got an internship and that internship turned into a job offer, and I worked that job offer and keep kind of like switching jobs, get a house, like get trapped into that. I didn't go down that path, but ultimately like I did work for other people. Again, it was very new ventures. So I wasn't working for, IQVIA, or I mean, that's such a random company. It's just one a bunch of my friends work for. Like I wasn't working for like Fidelity or like some massive IBM, like some massive conglomerate, but still I was working for other people. And I definitely had the realization, like when my salary was cut in 2020, like where I could just get a text and be like, hey, your salary has been cut effective immediately, and just feeling so powerless and so not in control of my life. And I hated that feeling. Like I hated that with basketball. Like honestly, basketball is a prime example of that. You only got 5 people on the court. I mean, you were saying before this how you saw the guy who started over you in high school and how that like kind of irked you, gave you a competitive fire. I mean, that's basketball. I grew up playing basketball, only 5 people on the court. But like doesn't matter, you might feel like you're better than them, but if the coach decides that, the coach likes them more, thinks they might have more potential than you, whatever it may be, you're on the bench, you're not playing. So kind of felt that same way with, my career. Was ultimately someone else was deciding if I was a starter, and I want to decide if I'm a starter.
Mm. And so something in there too, I think a lot of times you always hear people say, oh, when you get older, life happens, or this happens, or I even hear people my age, our age today say, oh, something happened here and now I can't do X, Y, and Z, or life happened to me. But not a lot of people are allowing themselves to dictate what happens in life. Too many people allow life to happen, I feel like, and not enough people are taking control and they're taking action.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, I'm definitely someone who, for better or worse, I think of an idea and I go for it. For better or worse, definitely sometimes might be for worse. But I think a lot of people have those ideas and then they kind of like put them in the back. They put them in the back burner and they go, well, I can't do this right now because I don't know, I'm too busy, or my job, or blah, blah, blah. I have something happening in my family. Whereas I've definitely been someone where like I have an idea and that idea probably won't get pushed to the back. Like I'm going to try it and at least like see what, at least see what I can make of it.
So I know this, but you did over $1 million in gross revenue in an Airbnb business. So crossing that $1 million revenue mark, regardless of net profit, that's something that most people will never achieve in their life. Quite honestly, what is the makeup of that portfolio, and how have you decided to build your wealth, and what are you looking to do going forward?
Yeah. So early on, I had to be incredibly scrappy. I couldn't
Mhm.
really be that selective with opportunities, and I didn't have a lot of cash. So I had to, when I started, initially I just started with short-term rentals, doing 3 things. One, boats, actually, boat rentals. Could buy a boat pretty cheap, rent it out in the summer, kind of for similar prices to how much you could rent a house out for. Second, Airbnb, and today, like my Airbnb business is many, many times larger than my boat business. But early on, it was like a creative way to start. Also 2020 just was a freak time period for boat rentals. Like that was like the perfect, like, yeah, the world was going to crap, but the boat rental world was crushing. Things have actually, a couple of years later are back normal, and not quite the case. Because when I said tell people I started with boats, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to start doing that too. And I'd be like, to be frank, I would do Airbnb today. And the reasons why I would do Airbnb, co-hosting, or arbitrage. And it's what I did do also, where co-hosting, there's no initial investment. So if you don't have a lot of cash, doesn't matter. You're just managing a house for someone else. And arbitrage, you can all you have to do is buy furniture, or you can, which arbitrage is when you rent a property from a landlord and re-rent it. All you got to do is oftentimes buy furniture. I mean, I myself and, pet people, like mentees I have, like also have gone properties completely furnished, where you don't even have to buy furniture, or almost completely furnished. So it's just a low cost entryway into short-term rentals. And once I had a track record with co-hosting and arbitrage, and like I knew it worked, I was like, look, my goal is to buy real estate. That's like always been my goal. Like when I was a kid, I daydreamed like owning cool, beach houses, owning cool mountain houses, owning cool lake houses. Like that was something I'd lie in bed at night and like think about, the dream house I would have. And then on top of that, I just know that there's massive benefits to owning real estate, especially being like an American in our US. I mean, you obviously, this is your cup of tea, but huge tax benefits to being a real estate investor. It's truly the way to build long-term wealth. So I wanted to buy. I didn't want to just, be leveraging other people's properties. So I had to be creative buying too. And I raised money from investors, started buying properties, did creative financing, and actually at this point have purchased 8 properties, and I'm under contract on my 9th. I've also bought an Airstream camper, largely for the tax benefits to that I have listed. So at this point, I have 25 properties, 25 listings, 8 of which are houses that I and investors own, an Airstream camper, and then the rest are a mix of arbitrage mostly, and then some co-hosting properties.
So one thing I want to talk about the arbitrage before we talk about the ownership. Have you ever done any sort of not lease to buy, but have you ever done any options? Because the way I kind of see arbitrage too is it's almost like a drive it before you buy it, almost test drive, where you can get a property that's really well performing and the landlord decides to get rid of it, you're first in line to buy it. Have you ever had that situation happen?
Yeah. So when I do arbitrage, actually at this point, a lot of like I'll do it partially with like I have the intention to buy in this area. So last October, I got a arbitrage property, 3-bed, 1.5 bath, single family home. And now I'm under contract on a 4-bed, 4.5 bath under single family home, probably about 5-minute drive from that property.
Gotcha. And so one of the things you were showing me when we were in Nashville was your software. You have a calculator that's available for use where it analyzes short-term rental deals. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So when I started short-term rentals, like I needed every deal to be a home run. Co-hosting doesn't really matter.
Lose money. Yeah.
Yeah. Co-hosting doesn't, you're not putting any cash in the game. So in theory, it's like an infinite return. But arbitrage and buying are very much, an investment that you need to optimize. So I was like very, very religious with running the numbers and early on. And initially I use an Excel spreadsheet for that. And, I'd run the numbers on hundreds of properties with an Excel spreadsheet. And I just knew, and having a computer science and a digital products background, I just knew that there was a better way than an Excel spreadsheet to run, financial analysis on short-term rental properties. A lot of the data is on the internet. So it was just annoying to have to be on my computer, have another 2 tabs open on different screens, and then just copy and paste from one to the other. It was just, and also like I couldn't just do it on my phone. I don't know if you've ever tried to do Excel on your phone, but it's like practically, it's impossible. So if I want to run the numbers on Airbnbs, like I like doing it on the couch on my phone. I don't like, that's what I'll do it in bed. And so built a tool, built in a software, an app where you could just do just that. I mean, it's the quickest, most efficient way to run the numbers on short-term rental properties at scale. So did launch that almost about a year ago, and it's been great. I mean, a lot of people are using it. and obviously including myself. And a lot of people are, giving great feedback and, telling us every day what they like about it, how we can make it better. And we're continually making it better.
And is that nationwide? Any markets it'll analyze deals for?
Yeah. So BNB Calc, we pull data from a bunch of national data providers. So maybe not like, because we pull tax information from, one data provider online. We'll pull bedrooms, bathrooms, sleep count from another data provider. So in short, yes, we have a bunch of national data providers, and then AirDNA is our partner for the revenue estimate component. So wherever, you can go on AirDNA and analyze, like, as long as they have it, then we have it as, in addition,
So
as results of.
would you so you kind of see co-hosting and arbitrage as kind of, I guess, a quicker route to financial freedom? I guess if you could go back, would you have just waited to save up the money to buy your own properties, or would you recommend people to do both at the same time? Or what would you, is there anything you'd go back 2 years ago and do differently?
Yeah. So, and this is something I tell people that I work with on a coaching capacity, is like, it depends on your situation. So, if someone's coming to me and they actually like their job, like they don't mind it, and they're making 300K a year, and they're saying, oh, I think, maybe I'm going to start an arbitrage business, to build up some additional income that way. I'm like, why? You make 300K a year, is a lot of that's W2. Like, you could get some awesome financing. You can get some great conventional financing. And, are you trying to replace, like, are you trying to quit your job? Like, what's your goal? If your goal is not to quit your job, then why are you necessarily starting an arbitrage business? Does that make sense? Like, for me, it was like very like, I need my own business. I need my own cash flow. I need my cash flow from short-term rentals to far exceed like my job, so I can quit my job. Like, that's my first order of business. Well, I didn't necessarily say to quit my job, but like to just have freedom. Like, I need to be able to have the option to do this full time. And in order for me to do that first, it's not about long-term wealth. It's about paying my bills. It's about being able to pay for food, So that was my first priority, was cash flow. And if, a lot of folk out there, that's going to be their first priority too. And in that sense, yeah, co-hosting and arbitrage are going to be the best options. If you're looking to, get tax advantages of being a real estate investor, to build long-term wealth, to have, to make, to become a multimillionaire through real estate over the next 10, 15, 20 years, like, buying real estate is the tried and tested way of doing that. And it doesn't require you to call 100 landlords, in the next 7 days to make it happen.
That's actually, I had the same take on that. So I have clients a lot of times that are trying to look what they should do in real estate perspective, and they're making combined household income 350K, and they talk about co-hosting or arbitrage, and it's, to your point, they can get awesome financing probably, and they already have a job, that probably a higher paying job. So odds are they could, instead of doing co-hosting where their hourly rate, let's say I co-host a property and I get $100,000 property, I co-host and I get paid 15 grand a year to co-host that. If you take that on an hourly basis compared to what I can make hourly at my day job or through a different business, odds are it's probably less than that. So it doesn't make sense from an hours perspective for me to actually do that. But I see these people that, unfortunately, they get sold into like co-hosting or arbitrage, boot camps or mentorships. And it's like, I don't think they really need that. If you're making that much money, I don't think the path is through co-hosting or arbitrage. It's more so towards buying your own real estate.
But if it's an instance of like, oh, I hate my work, I hate my job, I hate my boss, like, get me out of this, then I'd say, all right, okay, let's do it. This is the way to do it. But if you're not, if it's really just like, I'm looking to complement my addition, my 401k, like, I know that short-term rentals are better than long-term rentals, well then, okay, buy a short-term rental and don't buy a long-term rental. Because, short-term rentals are the highest performing, sub asset class of residential real estate there is right now. So I think everyone has a different situation, and like someone who's making 65,000 who like, doesn't have through their career, it might take them 10 years to get to six figures. Like, let's get you going. Let's let's put the phone to your ear and let's call 100 landlords in the next 2 days, or next, maybe let's call 10 a day for the next 10 days, and let's get you some deal flow. But for someone who, they might go from making 350K to 450K through one promotion, which, that promotion won't require that much more work. They'll be doing the same amount of work, making $100,000 a year. Like, yeah, to make $100,000 extra dollars in short-term rentals, that's going to be a lot of work. Once you get there, you can automate it. Like, you can definitely automate it. But to get, to grow the business to that point, the trade-off for you might not be there. Whereas, someone who's 25 years old making 75K a year, the trade-off will definitely be there for them.
So I know you've hinted at it earlier on this podcast, but I remember when we were in Nashville, you were in my ear about the tax benefits and tax strategies. You were asking me a ton of questions. What are some of the strategies that you implement in your business from a tax perspective right now?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest like capital asset that I buy is furniture. Like, I probably bought, 6-figure furniture last year. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan. I obviously don't want to give wrong tax advice. Normally I say like not a CPA, and then I'll say talk to a CPA. Whereas here I can just be like, Ryan, correct whatever I'm saying, which is great. I'm happy, truly blessed. But you can write off, right now you can write off 100% of, or last year, you could write off 100% of furniture purchases in the first year you buy the furniture. So, that was huge, 6-figure furniture purchase. Bonus depreciation, you can still kind of add it back when you are buying real estate. So that was huge. Furniture purchases. Second, depreciation on properties. I'm sure Ryan, if you guys have listened to this before, I'm sure has talked about cost segregation studies via the short-term loophole, but that's something, definitely something that this year I actually haven't done it before. I'm going to be honest. I haven't done it before. This year I will definitely do it. So really just taking advantage of depreciation, whether it be furniture or properties.
And there's one more thing I wanted to get into. I forgot. What was I going to say? So you mentioned a little bit earlier how you had investors for some of your properties. What does that process kind of look like?
Yeah, so that's also why it was great for me to start with co-hosting an arbitrage, was because, I mean, literally, like, I kid you not, like, the way I got my first investors was I had friends over. Like, again, I had the boat business, so we went out on the boat. I had friends go out. I took one of the boats offline for myself, and had several friends on it. And literally, like, on the boat, I got a ping. You probably see on social media people who are like, oh, what it's like to be an Airbnb host, and ping, get a notification of a $4,000 or $5,000 booking. And that's literally what happened. I was on the boat, got a booking request. I'm like, dang, just got, $5,000, hashtag passive income. Obviously I did not say that.
That's a great sales tactic, dude. I'm going to steal that.
My
friend, if you had your phone connected to the aux at a party,
just
boom, it's like Airbnb notification, $4,300 payout.
Ryan,
Ryan,
you have just
by. Yeah.
Michelle has just requested to book your property, $4,592.06 straight to your bank account.
That's such a good sales tactic. All right, so go ahead. Sorry, I didn't interrupt.
Yeah, so I literally showed my friends that, and they're just like, "What the heck?" Because $5,000. That's the same as if you're making. A lot of my friends. I was living in New York after college, and a lot of my buddies, even from college, moved to New York. So someone who's making at 23 years old, who's making 100K in New York, which, like, that's a high income earner. That's someone who's coming out of school, like, has a good job, and which is where I was at the time. They're making 100K. But what is that after, taxes? Like, what's your bi-monthly paycheck? It's like $2,500 times 2. So you're only making actually $5,000 a month from that 6-figure job. So I was able to just be like, dude, I'm doing boat rentals and Airbnbs in North Carolina, and bang, like $5,000 on my phone right here. And that definitely, like, had, several of my friends were like, holy shit, dude, like, can we do it with you? Like, how can we invest? Like, what can we do to have some of that too?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're making 100 grand single in New York, you'd be lucky. You probably make out with maybe 68,000, 65,000 maybe after
Exactly.
taxes.
So
Yeah.
so like yeah, $5,000-ish a month, $2,500 each paycheck
Yeah.
if you do bi-monthly paychecks.
So are those initial investors, are those still people that are investing in deals with you today?
Yeah, so yeah, early on, the folk who invested with me first, like every single person that there was only a couple people that I invested with initially who I haven't done more deals with, and
Mhm.
I've bought them out. So
Mhm.
everyone I invested with early on, I was like, we're gonna do more. Like, if you're not in this to do more than just one, then and there was people who I had that conversation with, and it was just obvious that they just like wanted to do one just to like have a vacation house and like say they had it and to like make some money. And they didn't really have that like burning desire to like turn this into something bigger than what it was. So those folk didn't work with and instead worked with folk who were trying to take things to the next level. And yeah, I've done a bunch of deals with, that kind of like core group that I started with.
So I have some golden rules when it comes to acquiring properties. So one of those rules is I typically look for a gross revenue test. Anywhere between 18 to 20% of the purchase price is what I'm looking for. I also factor in about 40 to 50% operations expense, as well as I have these other little rules when it comes to underwriting a deal. Is there a certain metric that you use that you can tell, like we talked about, within 5 minutes to know if a deal's worthwhile or not?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely plug it into BNB Calc and get an idea of, first of all, what AirDNA is going to look like. And then BNB Calc, when you first do it, it's pretty much a napkin math. Like, you definitely have to go in and tweak the numbers. But I want a property. So my investment strategy has changed over the last 3 years, largely because, home prices have gone up in ways like, if you're an investor in something, like there was kind of a Airbnb gold rush and a lot of people jumped in. And now, you kind of have to be, in my opinion, like you have to be smarter.
Yeah.
And so the property, like I'm under contract. So early on, I mean, it was really easy, to be frank, to do my underwriting because I managed and co-hosted properties and I had their data, and that's also one of the advantages of being a co-host or doing arbitrage is like you have the data, the seasonality, who the customers are, which is like a big part of the game is like know your customers. Who are you trying to attract to come to this property? And how can you create an experience for those types of guests? So having that data, I could clearly be like, all right, for instance, buying this lake house for 585K. I have a comp in my portfolio that's the same bedroom, bathroom breakdown that's making 130. Like I can assume with pretty high confidence that it should do about the same. So that was where I started, was on that lake. But then
Mhm.
unfortunately, that same $585,000 lake house is probably $1 million today, which,
Wow.
is great for us because we bought several, but it also sucks because we can't, the numbers don't make sense anymore. So I had to move. So that was like my first step was like, all right, I already have data on properties. So made the underwriting really easy. And then went to Florida and I didn't have any properties in Florida. So that's where I had to, kind of get an idea of, do the enemy test, learn how other properties, look on Airbnb, check out their calendar, see how the consistency of their reviews, how to really develop a property or develop a process for underwriting properties in places I didn't already have properties. And yeah, the general rule I know your question was like general rule of thumb. But then actually, so Florida, a lot of properties, a lot of data. Then started
Mhm.
doing Florida got really expensive. So then I switched to Smoky Mountains. And Smoky Mountains, there's a lot less data. There is data in some places, but the places where there's a lot of data, chances are the numbers aren't good anymore. Because I know I was talking with Bill Faith I had him on my podcast, and he was saying that like he went into Banner Elk and bought a house. And then, he posted about it. And next thing you know, 30 more people
Yeah,
were in Banner Elk, all with like the same exact
that's
type of property
that's a Bill
that he
Faith
had.
effect right there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we were joking about that. So, I think he sold because it was like he did it and then 30 other people went in. But that's what you kind of find in the Smokies is like there's like certain towns that are like just have been blown up. And then there's like a lot of random areas that don't have data. And that like scares people from going into there because there isn't data. So kind of I started buying places without data, really with just like if we can transform this into like a crazy experience, I'm confident it will do well. Like, and just general rule of thumb, if I'm buying a house for 500K, which like that's where I've been buying. Like if you buy $1 million house, it's hard to hit that 200K. If you buy a $500,000 house, you can hit like hitting that 100K is like pretty reasonable. So that's really the math is like, if I'm spending 500, I want a house that can do 100, but like honestly, a lot of times I want upside of like 120, like 120 upside, and like conservative estimates 80. So I just gave a really long-winded answer to say that 500K goes in, I want 100K coming out.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have the 20% revenue.
Yeah, I'm sorry for going on a huge journey there to
No, it's
say
okay.
that to show how I've progressed and like, you know, the property I'm under contract on right now, there is comps, but like they're not professional comps and they're not doing that well, to be frank. So like if I were just to comp it based off the ones in the area, it would look like 80K. But because I'm like, I know that if I transform this thing and make it sweet, I think it actually could do 120, but there's no exact science that's going to tell me it's going to do 120.
Yep.
That's where I'm like, you know, I'm confident kind of shooting in the dark at this point and kind of going into places with less data than I was before.
No, you're right about that. So all else being equal, you're more likely to get 200 grand gross revenue by buying two $500,000 properties than you are to buy a $1 million property that's grossing 200K. Right. But
unless you buy a 900K, like 6,000 square foot house and you put like 300K into it, you know, like if you want to buy a house and put like 40K into it, it's going to probably be a 500K house.
Yeah. And I guess the only thing would then be is generally the more your purchase price, you tend to see your cash on cash numbers go down, but your overall cash flow would be greater. So it's just about knowing, you know, what your situation is. We have a client that she super high W2 earner, $500,000 W2 earner, bought a bunch of properties in the Smoky Mountains for $400,000, $350,000, and then fast forward a year or two later, and she's like, these properties are making a fraction of what I make at my W2 job. I would have just rather bought a $1.5 million property to start. You know, she would have saved so much more time.
And in hindsight, you know, I feel like I could have, because I wanted like chunks of the deals, and the way I raised money was investors got equity proportionate to the amount they put in. There was incentives for me to be the manager of the property from a cash perspective, but there wasn't incentive from a, like, you know, it was incentive for me to have a house where I could own a higher percentage of, which meant a less expensive house. So, but in hindsight, I'm like, dude, I could have like, you know, I could have gone bigger. I could have raised a lot of money, did some, you know, maybe, you know, whether a $2 million development or a, you know, multi-million-dollar boutique hotel or something like that. But, you know, I stuck with the 500 grand houses.
Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about before we wrap up today?
I guess your pod. So kind of question goes to you. What do you want to touch on?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we covered everything I wanted to. I guess you talked a little bit about your coaching or your mentorship. What does that look like, and what's some of the successes that your students have seen?
Yeah, so a year ago I created this calculator and I've had a lot of people using it. You know, but it really is kind of the tip of the iceberg on what you need to do. Like running numbers on properties is like the first I mean, would you consider that like the first stage? Getting good at that is like the first thing. But then obviously, all right, you found a property and, you know, there's even more to it than just running the numbers. How do you transform the property to reach its potential? How do you set up the management operation to make it so, you know, I manage 25 listings, but I can talk with Ryan for the last hour and, you know, not have to like respond to a guest or anything like that. You know, that's, you know, this is an A to Z process, and the calculator's A, but the Z. It's everything, every step of the way. So obviously, I can't work with nearly as many folks on a coaching capacity, and have to be a lot more selective, given it's actually my time, and you know that's really the most important commodity we all have. So I'm a lot more selective with that, obviously, but I do work with folk, and it's, you know, really rewarding. You know, my first mentee quit his job and is doing short-term rentals full time. You know, my second mentee would quit his job, but he makes like 300 grand from his W-2. So it's just like, you know, from a loan financing perspective, that's going to get you a lot of options. And, you know, have folk well on that process too, you know, having, you know, building cash flowing short-term rental businesses.
Awesome. Where can listeners of the podcast find you and your information?
Yeah, so find me on Instagram at Jeremy Werden, also on TikTok. But yeah, I'm pretty responsive in my DMs. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to me on Instagram.
Awesome.
Also do have a podcast and have had Ryan on it, and that just got posted. I checked 3 days ago. So if you want to hear me asking Ryan questions, go to my podcast, either on, you know, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and yeah, you can see how we flip the script.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Awesome, Ryan. Thank you for having me.